Hello Year 2, how are you? And welcome to today's reading lesson. Now today we're going to be carrying on looking at Fantastic Mr. Fox. And today we are going to be looking at chapter 6, which is called The Race. Oh, I wonder what happens in this chapter. Well, the skill that we're going to be looking at today is retrieval. So we're going to be retrieving key information from a text. So we're going to be picking out specific information from the text that we're reading in order to answer questions about it. And like every lesson, we're also going to be looking at some vocabulary. So we're going to be looking at a word and the words around it to try and work out its meaning. And before we do that, we are going to see how much we can remember from the last chapter. So see if we can explain what has happened so far. So here are your retrieval questions. You have 3. First one, why couldn't Farmer Bean hear Farmer Bunce? What did Farmer Bean decide they needed? And what did Mrs. Fox think the noise was? Now, if you need to look back at chapter 5 before you answer these questions to refresh your memory, that is fine. But if you can do them from memory, that's excellent, okay? So pause the video now and have a go. Okay, Year 2, so let's have a look. Number 1, why couldn't Farmer Bean hear Farmer Bunce? Remember, Farmer Bunce was shouting at him, wasn't he? Asking him what his next brilliant plan would be. But Farmer Bean couldn't hear him. And the reason that Farmer Bean couldn't hear him was because his earlobes were clogged, so they were full with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies. So his ears were filled with lots of rubbish, so the sound couldn't get through because they were clogged. Okay, number 2, what did Farmer Bean decide they needed? Well, remember, the farmers had been digging all night, hadn't they, using their own shovels, and it just wasn't working. So what did Farmer Bean decide they needed? Yes, you're right. He decided they needed mechanical shovels. Remember, a synonym for mechanical is automatic. We looked at that word last lesson, didn't we? Then number 3, what did Mrs. Fox think the noise was? Well, remember, there were rocks flying everywhere and there were trees falling down. And Mrs. Fox thought the noise was an earthquake. Okay, so brilliant. Well done if you got those right. That's fantastic. Now, shall we move on to today's lesson and have a look at our skill for today, which is retrieval. Well, like every other lesson, when we've looked at the other skills, we've also got a friend to help us today. Can you see him there? He's called Rex Retriever. And Rex Retriever is going to help us identify and explain key aspects of fiction and non-fiction texts. Now remember, a fiction text is a made-up story, isn't it? But non-fiction texts have facts in them. So you might have a non-fiction text about plants, for example, or you might have a non-fiction text about the Great Fire of London. And Rex also helps to identify and explain different characters, different events in the story, different titles. Okay, so I might ask you a question about a title and different information. Okay, so remember, with retrieval, we pick pieces of information out of the text, straight out of the text, to answer questions about it. Okay, there's no need to change them. You just literally pick it out of the text. So this means he's there to help you to answer questions by finding the answer in the text. Now remember, when we've looked at questions, retrieval questions in the past, we've looked at different words in the question, haven't we? So there might be a word in a question that we can highlight, and then when we're scanning the text, we can look for that word in the text to try and help us find the answer. So some questions that Rex Retriever might ask you. Well, he might ask you what different characters are called. He might ask you what the characters do in the story. He might even ask you the name of the chapter. And he might have asked you what you've learned about a particular topic. So you might be, as I said, reading a non-fiction book about plants. And Rex might ask you, what have you learned about plants? So you could go to the book and look for a couple of facts that you've learned about plants and then copy them down as your answer. So let's have a look at some of the types of questions you may find. So the first one, number 4, give 2 jobs that the worker ants do. So if I was looking at this question, the first word that stands out to me is the word to. We're looking for 2 jobs, okay? Not 1 job, we're looking for 2 jobs. And yes, also the word jobs stands out to you. So we're looking for 2 jobs. And 2 jobs for who? Well, look, it says worker ants. So we're looking for 2 jobs that the worker ants do. So we can use the keywords worker ants and jobs to scan the text to find those 2 jobs, okay? And then once I found them, I pick them straight out of the text and then I write them 1 on each line. Now, number 10, it says tick 2 good points about plastics. So how many boxes are we going to put ticks in? Yes, we're only going to put ticks in 2 boxes. Now it says plastics can be. So we're going to be scanning the text for all of the good points about plastics. Okay, and then once you've found them, you tick those 2 good points. Okay, then number 20, draw 3 lines to describe oceans, lakes and rivers. So you might be reading a non-fiction text about oceans, lakes and rivers, and it's asking you for a definition of each one. So you can go to the heading that says oceans and scan the text looking for a definition and then draw your line once you've found it. And then you could look at the section about rivers and scan the text looking for a definition and then you join your line. Okay, number 12 says tick to show what jesters and servants do in the castle. The first one has been done for you, so it's given you an example. Now it has lots of different things that you can do in the castle: cleaning, dancing, juggling and cooking. So you need to scan the text looking for what both the jesters and the servants do in the castle. And then once you've found them in the text, you tick which person, either the jesters or the servants, that each thing refers to. Then number 5 says, why was Molly always too busy to tidy up? Well, remember when we looked at questions yesterday, we looked at question words that go at the start and what those tell us about what we're trying to find. So when it says, why was Molly always too busy to tidy up? That's asking us for a reason, isn't it? It's one of our 5 W's. Why, when, who, what, and where. Okay, so why always asks us for a reason, but who asks us for a person, when asks us for a time, where asks us for a place, what asks us for a specific thing, okay, and why asks us for a reason. Now here are some other questions that Rex might ask you. He might ask you, where is the story set? Now our question word in this question is where. So we're going to be looking for a place, aren't we? Then the second one, who is the main character in the story? So it says who as our question word. So therefore we're going to be looking for a person. We're looking for the main character. Then the third one, how is the dilemma resolved? So something might go wrong in the story and you need to find how it's resolved, how they solve that problem. And it's using the word how, which needs an explanation. Remember, if you say, how are you? The other person then explains how they are feeling. How is the dilemma resolved? You then have to explain how the dilemma is resolved. Then finally, tell me one fact you have found out in this text about. Okay, so you scan the text, you look for a fact, and then you copy it down as your answer. Okay, so now we know all about Retriever Rex. Shall we start reading chapter 6 of Fantastic Mr. Fox and use all these brilliant skills that we've learnt about? Okay, so chapter 6, the race. Now there began a desperate race, the machines against the foxes. In the beginning, the hill looked like this. Can you see the hill still looks like a hill, doesn't it? They haven't dug much out of it yet. Okay, next page. After about an hour, as the machines bit away more and more soil from the hilltop, it looked like this. Can you see they've taken a massive chunk out of the hill now, haven't they, with their mechanical shovels? Sometimes the foxes would gain a little ground so they'd get a little bit further ahead, and the clanking noises would grow fainter. And Mr. Fox would say, we're going to make it. I'm sure we are. Now it says here that the clanking noises would grow fainter when the foxes gained a little ground. So when they got a little bit further ahead, the sound got fainter. The noise of the clanking got fainter. So if you're further away from something, further away from a noise, is it going to be louder or quieter? Yes, it's going to be quieter, isn't it? So therefore, the word faint, well, it's an adjective because it's describing the sound. It's describing how noisy the sound is. And yes, it's not strong, so it's not very loud, the noise. And it's not very clear either because it's far away. You can't really make out what it is. Now, some synonyms for this. Remember, a synonym is a word that means the same. So we have weak, so you could say it's a weak sound, or a quiet sound. And obviously the antonym, the opposite of that, would be loud. Now, we can use the word faint, the adjective faint, in other contexts. So we've used it here to describe a noise, but we can also say the lamp gave out a faint glow. Okay, so if it gives out a faint glow, it's not a very strong lamp, okay? It doesn't give out much light. And then we also have the woman felt faint. Now, if you feel faint, you feel quite dizzy, okay? And your head starts to spin, okay? And it's probably normally because you haven't eaten enough or you haven't drunk enough. So the woman felt faint, so she didn't feel very well at all. And that again is describing how the woman felt. And the lamp one is describing the lamp's light. And in this context, faint is describing the noise. Okay, so let's carry on reading. But then, a few moments later, the machines would come back at them, and the crunch of the mighty shovels would get louder and louder. Once the foxes actually saw the sharp metal edge of one of the shovels as it scraped up the earth just behind them. Oh, I bet they were terrified, weren't they? Now it says here that the machines would come back at them and the crunch of the mighty shovels. Now it's describing the shovels as mighty. Now let's have a look at the shovels in the picture. How could we describe the shovels? Well, yes, they're very big, aren't they? And look at the hole that they've taken out of the hilltop. So therefore, it's very powerful, isn't it? So therefore, I wonder what the word mighty means because it's describing the shovels. And we've just said that the shovels look very big and they look very powerful because they've taken a big chunk out of the hilltop. So let's find out what mighty means. Well, mighty again, like faint, is an adjective. And it means when you have great power or strength. Okay, so the mechanical shovels had great power because they were automatic. And look at the strength they had to dig out that massive hole out of the hilltop. And it's especially because of its size. So again, we said it was big. So therefore, the shovels have great power, they have great strength, and they're very big, aren't they? So we can say that they're mighty.